Yeah. Can you turn to the book of Matthew? Matthew is the first book in what is called the New Testament. And there's four of these books that start out the New Testament. And they're called Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And they're really biographies about Jesus' life and the miracles and the ministry and the teachings of Jesus. And they're from four different perspectives. And these are four dudes that actually walked with Jesus and experienced miracles firsthand. And so we've been taking some time to look at this teaching, this collection of we have chapters 5, 6, and 7 of Matthew. It's called Sermon on the Mount. And this was the first public teaching that Jesus ever gave to people. And we've been looking through this for the last 5 months, and we've just been looking at what does this mean for us, and what does this mean for us in the 21st century? And this is really Jesus laying a foundation of doctrine and what it looks like to follow him, and what it looks like for a person to surrender their whole self, their heart, their mind, and their soul to Jesus. And so that's what we've been looking at for the last 5 months, and we are almost done. Courtney actually is not just an administrative assistant. She also preaches a dang good message. And so Courtney is actually going to be preaching and finishing up our Sermon on the Mount series next Wednesday. And so I encourage you to not just come tonight, but come next week, because I know that you're going to be encouraged, and it's going to be super, super great. Also, if you have a phone on you, I would love for you to, maybe you don't have a paper Bible or anything like that, but you can get on your phone and you can actually type into Google or in your app store, like the Bible app or YouVersion or just Bible, and you'll be able to download a Bible app where there is hundreds of translations and reading plans. And maybe you've followed Jesus for a while and you're like, dude, Taylor, you talk about reading the Bible all the time, but how do you read the Bible? You read it word by word. I'm just kidding. It's one of the hardest things about reading the Bible is just getting started. And so one of the great things that you can do is on a little tab on the bottom of the app, it says plans. And, you can see plans that your friends are doing. You can search for your friends on there. You can have Bible reading plans as short as 3 days or as long as a year. And you can search by topics, and maybe you're walking through some anxiety, maybe you're walking through some depression, maybe you're struggling with self-worth or whatever. You can search those things on the Bible app, and you can do Bible reading plans geared specifically towards those topics. And so you can begin to understand what is the heart of God on this issue, and what is the heart of God on this thing that I'm experiencing in life. And so the Bible app is incredible. If you don't have it, I would encourage you to download it. You can even download it right now if you want to. But we're going to be looking at Matthew chapter 7, verses 24 through 27. And the title of my message, if you're taking notes, whether that's on your phone or on the quarter sheet or on a notebook that you've brought with you, the title of my message is The Rock. And yeah, like Dwayne The Rock Johnson. All right, The Rock, come on in. I made you look. Dwayne The Rock Johnson is not coming here with his fantastic turtleneck and fanny pack. Yeah, that's good times right there. Just, it's just putting out the vibe. Yeah. The Rock. Yeah, I am The Rock. You're welcome. These hot dogs are actually really big, Wow, I need to move on. So we're going to be looking at verses 24 through 27. And verses 24 through 25 says this: "Everyone then who hears these words of mine," and this is actually Jesus talking. And if you're on the YouVersion Bible app or you're reading on a paper Bible, these words might be red, and the red letters in the Bible are the words of Jesus. And so everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock, like an actual rock, not Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, but it did not fall because it had been founded on the rock. And so if you're taking notes, the one thing, the main thing that we're going to be talking about tonight is this: your foundation determines your stability. Your foundation determines your stability. And so if you're taking notes, I'd really encourage you to write that down. And everything that we're going to be reading and talking about tonight really points to this truth, because I strongly believe that's what these few sentences are talking about and what Jesus was ultimately talking about. So your foundation determines your stability. And we know this to be true. Like if you don't have a good base, it affects everything after it. Like if you're applying your makeup, where are makeup people that are here? Hey, I thought of you when I was doing this. Courtney's super into makeup too. It's just like everything that Courtney loves tonight, I guess. I don't know. She's great. She reads a lot of books too. So if you want to buy her something, you could buy her like a Barnes & Noble or Amazon gift card. Her birthday's coming up some point this year too. So I don't know when it is, actually. It's terrible. When is your birthday? August. Cool, it's in August. Foundation, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, when you're applying your makeup, if you don't do a really, really good job with your foundation, everything else is going to not turn out that well. You can tell that I don't really know what I'm talking about, but just listen. Like when you go to if you don't contour correctly, it can make things look weird on your face, and it can make it look cakey. I've heard the word cakey in makeup in the same sentence, so I know that's real. I don't know if it has anything to do with foundation and contouring. I just kind of threw some words together. I tried to find a picture of a bad makeup job, but I Googled, and I didn't feel right about posting or showing a picture because I didn't want to be mean, and I didn't know if that picture of that person was a joke or real, so I decided not to put a picture up. But depending on, and how many Minecraft people do we have? That's awesome. Yeah. Don't judge me if this sounds dumb. If you don't, depending on what blocks you use first, yeah, that's right. Yeah, I know what I'm talking about. Your structure in Minecraft might look janky. I got a picture of a pretty cool thing in Minecraft. That's cool. Yeah, is any of that your guys's? Did you guys make that? Yeah, Mod Pizza. Yep, it's pretty good. If you want to build a race car, so a cool fact about Sean Willis, he's playing guitar in the center tonight. He builds race cars and builds race car motors. If you want to build a race car, the motor you choose is key for the rest of the build and what you want to accomplish with that car. And I have a picture of Ryan Turk. He's a Formula D drift driver, and that is a Toyota, and that is a Ferrari motor inside of his Toyota, and shreds tires. So go on YouTube, type in Ryan Turek, Toyota, Ferrari motor. It'll enrich your life. If you don't, that's okay. Oftentimes in music, how many instrumentalists do we have that play in school bands, or just in you're like a closet musician and you don't play for anybody, but you play for yourself and you play for the heart of music. Oftentimes in music, if you don't learn the basics, you'll struggle to progress in your abilities. Like if you don't learn the basics of your instrument, you'll kind of reach like a cap. And sometimes this is what I've found in guitar, is that if I don't go back to the basics, sometimes I can't move forward in my ability. And something that I've learned in remodeling is we bought a fixer-upper, and so there's tons of remodeling going on in our house. And currently, you might know this, but our bathroom is half torn apart for the last 2 months, so that's been fun. Just exposed studs and wiring, and it's really good. We have toddler and a little baby, but it's fine. We don't let them chew on it too long, Just, teething, they got to chew on something. But something that I've learned in remodeling, when you go to do new drywall and tape it and mud it and texture it and paint it, if that work isn't done well, paint isn't going to cover it, and texture isn't going to cover it. The key phrase at our house is, "Oh, the texture will cover it," and it doesn't. And it doesn't, and you'll be able to see the imperfections and maybe the shortcuts that you made. And so really the whole thing of this is the foundation matters. We watch makeup tutorials on YouTube. Like we watch, I don't, but I'm sure you do, some of you do. We watch Minecraft videos on YouTube. We watch instrument tutorials or videos of just about how to do just about everything in life. When you go to fix a car, if you've never fixed a car before, or you've never fixed a specific part on your car, you'll probably go to YouTube to learn how to fix whatever you're trying to fix. And this helps us, these videos help us understand what goes into making something look and sound and operate the way that we want it to. We try and understand the beginning and the roots of something so the outcome is truly what we want. And a good foundation is the key to success in basically everything in existence. Like pretty much everything in existence. If you don't have a good foundation, you don't have a good end product. And when we look at the Sermon on the Mount, what we notice is that Jesus has spent some time laying down a foundation for what the life of a Christian looks like. He's been speaking directly to the heart of a person. And you could say that the heart is the foundation of a human being. And the Bible talks a lot about the heart. It talks about it pretty extensively. But here's just a few examples of the Bible talking about your heart. This is Jesus talking in Luke chapter 6. A good man brings good things out of the good stored up in his heart. And an evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in his heart. For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. And then Solomon wrote, this was like a really long time ago. He wrote in Proverbs, he says, "Keep your heart with all vigilance," which means careful watch. Keep careful watch of your heart, for from it flows the springs of life. And although the Bible talks a lot about the heart being the source of what comes out of your life, this idea of your heart being the source is not just a Jesus thing. It's something that we encounter on a daily basis with people who maybe don't even claim to follow Jesus. And think about how many times you've heard this phrase, "follow your heart." Have you guys ever heard this phrase before? It's a pretty common phrase. You may have said it in a conversation in the last few weeks, or maybe someone has said it to you. But oftentimes it's in reference to a decision that needs to be made. And some questions that we ask are, what sport should I play? What classes should I take? What college should I go to? Who should I date? What job offer should I accept? I don't know if I've ever had multiple job offers, so I've never had to ask that question. But maybe you have. And so what job should I accept? And these are typically situations that you hear this phrase used, but what does it really mean? I use a lot of phrases in life where I'm like, what does that actually mean? Like if you stop and kind of think about things that you say, sometimes you'll realize like, wow, what is even coming out of my mouth? And so I know that I've said this. I'm like, what does it mean to follow your heart? And so I did what any normal person would do. I Googled it, right? You're like, if you don't know what to do or what something means, you just Google it. And so, here's what one article said. And I know this is a blanket statement. This is one article, and this is not what follow your heart, listen to your heart means for every single person. But for the context of this message, we're going to roll with this. It means to follow your dreams, fulfill your desires, live your passion. It seems legit, right? Doesn't it? Follow your dreams, follow your desires, follow your passions. Like it seems super legit. So if you think about, okay, like what sport should I play? Should I play baseball or should I do track? And it's like, well, what sport do you enjoy? Are you good at baseball? One. Or do you like to run? Like, do you like to run long distance? Do you like to run short distance? Do you like to jump over really high, scary things? Like run with this big flexy pole in your hand and stick it in the ground and like catapult yourself over? Like this other really really high pole, or maybe you want to jump into this pit of sand, and I don't know. And so these are questions, and like, you're like, yeah, I'm super passionate about running. I don't understand you, but you're passionate about running. So I would follow your desire to run, and you should do track. What classes should I take? I think you should ask yourself the question, okay, what kind of profession do I want to go into? What kind of job do I want to have? Like, what college do I want to go to? What part of the country do you want to live in? And maybe you want to go to college to be an engineer. So I would advise you, like, go to a college that you can afford and that has a great engineering program, or a nursing program, or a trade school. I know Josh is going to a trade school, and maybe it's like diesel mechanics, or it's all these different things. So like, what is your passion and what are your dreams? And put those questions through those filters. Who should I date? Like, does this person have the same like morals as you? Do they have the same moral compass that you have? Do they have the same values that you have? Do they have kind of the same dreams that you have? What job offer should I accept? The first question I would ask is, do you have a job? And if your answer is no, my second question would be, do you need a job? And if your answer is yes, and I would say, just accept one. I don't know. You're in high school. Does it work with your hours of sports in school? Yes. Do it. Well, it's McDonald's. That doesn't matter. Work at McDonald's because you need money and it creates a work ethic and it's really good for you. So don't resist a job. But this is super legit. Like, follow your passions, follow your dreams, follow your desires. And this can be a foundation to some sense of your life. And the only really flaw that I see is if you've lived for longer than 10 seconds, which I think all of us in this room have, like, you'll realize that sometimes our passions, our desires, and our dreams are not helpful for us, right? Sometimes they're not super helpful. Right now with Madison, she's like just over 2 years old, and she doesn't really know any better, but she just has this overwhelming desire to just run everywhere and just go anywhere, and she has like no concept of what's dangerous. And so sometimes when we're walking out to the car in our driveway, she'll just start like running or walking really, really fast, and we're like, Madison, stop, because she's heading right towards the road. And so her passion and her like desire is just to run and just explore. But that's not super helpful in a driveway when you're heading towards the street. Your desire to only eat pizza and Little Debbie's like oatmeal cream pies or honey buns. Those are so good. Have you guys ever had those? Honey buns and oatmeal cream pies? Jordan, can you do yourself a favor and just head to Safeway after youth tonight and get an oatmeal cream pie? Jordan, you stop. I'm talking to that, Jordan. And you get a honey bun, girl, because they're so good. Okay? We'll talk later. I'm just kidding. But it's not helpful for your well-being. I came across this article. There's a hip-hop artist, a rapper named Lil Yachty. Have you guys ever heard of this guy? He's got like red dreads, and he's got really interesting hair, and we got a picture of him. And yeah, dude, this dude's like 20 years old. It's crazy. Supposedly, he claims that he has only eaten pizza since second grade. That he literally he's eaten pizza every single day since he was in second grade, and he is currently 20 years old. And he's never eaten a fruit, he's never eaten a veggie. So he claims. I don't know how true it is. But, and someone was like, how do you stay fit? How do you stay healthy? He's like, I don't. And I'm like, that's not funny. Like, that's not something that was a joke, by the way. That's not. Thanks. I appreciate you guys. You guys are awesome. But like, if your desire and your passion is to only eat pepperoni pizza, that's his favorite, he said. He'll eat any pizza. I just watched an interview to like clarify if this was true. And he said pepperoni pizza is his favorite. He just recently opened last year a Yachty's Pizzeria in New York. So anyways, your passion of making fun of your brother and sister is like not helpful. I know it's really hard to overcome those desires, but it's not helpful. Your desire to beat up your siblings is not helpful. okay? Unless it's arm wrestling, like that's okay. So Trey, Macy, arm wrestling later. Like that's fine. That settles all things. Your passion to play video games and do nothing else with your life is not helpful. No, Trey, that is bad. Like, if your desire is to play video games 24/7, nonstop, you're like, I'm going to be a video game designer when I grow up. And it's like, oh my gosh, like, okay, you suck at math. Like, maybe that's not what God has for you. And that's how we make it spiritual, like, maybe that's not the way, the path that God is leading you down. And we just don't want to tell you that math is not your strong suit. Maybe your desire is to watch movies that don't align with the character of Jesus. It's not helpful. Maybe your desire to look at pornography is not helping your brain develop correctly or have a healthy view of sexuality in relationships. And you can quickly see that your desires can be good even in the moment or even for longer than a moment, maybe an extended period of time, but they can also be extremely destructive. And this is why Jesus describes the foundation of our life not being in our desires, our passions, and our dreams, but instead of the truth of the gospel. And the gospel is the good news of Jesus. So when he says, everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them will be like the wise man who built his house on the rock, and the rains fell, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on the house, but it did not fall. If you have a paper Bible or you have the YouVersion Bible app, I would encourage you to highlight verse 24 and verse 25. But it did not fall because it had been founded on the rock. So the gospel taking root in your heart and in your life is extremely important. And it's almost as if Jesus is saying this: when the tragedies and difficulties in life come, your foundation determines your stability. So when the tragedies come, when the difficulties of life come, your foundation determines your stability. Notice that when Jesus said when the rains came, when the wind came, when the floods came and it beat on the house, it did not fall. He didn't say because you have really, really strong willpower. Jesus didn't say just try really, really hard and then you'll be able to fight away the storms. If you just board up the windows of your life and you just try hunker down, then you can wait the storm out and then everything's going to be okay. But that's not what Jesus said. He said because it has been founded on the rock, and the rock being Jesus, the rock being the gospel. So what will truly happen if my foundation is not in Jesus? Sometimes I ask the question, like, what's really like the worst thing that can happen? So if I decide not to eat fruits and veggies, if I choose not to exercise, if I choose not to do these things, like, what's the worst that could happen? Like, it can't be that bad, right? Like, if I play video games 12 hours a day, like, it's not that bad. Like, I mean, the blue light from the TV is not that bad. Like, I'll go blind at 60 instead of 90. Like, I'm okay with that. But you realize that's 30 years. Like 30 years without sight is kind of a big deal. Health, yeah, okay, you can, yeah. No, but sometimes we can say, what is like the worst that can happen? Like, I don't see far into the future. And I think sometimes as teenagers, like, that's one of like the detriments of being a teenager is we have a hard time looking into the future and processing, what does this mean for me later? So if I watch this show on Netflix, like, yeah, there's some questionable things in it, but it's really not that bad. It's because sometimes we can't see like the future. If I look at this website, if I watch this, if I do this, it's really not that bad. And so sometimes we can ask this question of, well, what if I don't like put my foundation in Jesus? Like, what's the worst that can happen? So Jesus goes on to say, and everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rains fell, the floods came, and the winds blew, and it fell, and great was the fall of it. So Jesus is explaining that simply hearing that he can redeem the brokenness of humanity is not enough. He says that it's beyond and it's bigger than hearing. It's demonstrating. It's beyond simply hearing the words of Jesus. It's demonstrating those words. Jesus is saying in order to root yourself in him, you can't simply hear a message about generosity. You must be generous yourself. In order to root yourself in him, you can't simply hear about being a light in the darkness, but you have to be the light in the darkness. In order to root yourself in him, you can't just hear a message about anger, but you have to love and to work things out. In order to root yourself in him, you can't just hear a message about loving all people. You have to actually love all people. In order to root yourself in him, you can't just hear a message about not judging other people, but you have to actually not be judgmental yourself. It's about allowing the words of Jesus and the truth of the gospel to take root in your heart. According to this teaching, Jesus would say if you simply hear the message but don't internalize it and allow it to take root in your heart, when the storms of life come, they will blow you right over. The storms will tear you down because when your foundation is not in Christ, it's straight willpower that you're fighting against life with. And willpower, friends, is a finite resource. It's not something we have an abundance of. This is why it's important for a recovering alcoholic to not surround themselves with alcohol. If you struggle with porn, don't rely on your willpower to get you through and to overcome. If you're bound by comparison, get rid of Instagram so you're not tempted by the dang comparison game. Speaking to myself. If you are trying to face life on willpower, you will end up like the house built on sand, tore up and destroyed. And can I be honest with you? This is so difficult. Like, it's super easy for us to just look at this, and it's super easy for me to hold the microphone and say all of these things, and it's another thing for me to put this microphone down and go home and to live these things out. It's so difficult as well to try and go through life on willpower. If we trust in who Jesus is, if we trust in his power and authority, we will find that we don't have to rely on willpower, but instead we can rest in the power of Jesus. And the last thing I want you to write down is this: willpower is not what gets you through the storms and trials in life. It's by the power of Jesus' death and resurrection. So as the band comes, we're gonna talk through a couple questions, or we're actually gonna reflect on a few questions just individually. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna kind of spread out through the auditorium, and the band is gonna be playing a song, and you are more than welcome to sing the words that are gonna be on the screen. But I would also encourage you to take a look at these questions that we're gonna talk about in just a second, and allow Jesus to into your life, not physically and literally, but allow Jesus to reveal things to you that you didn't know were there. And I hope that as you hear these words of Jesus, that you hear the words that maybe I've spoken tonight. I pray that there would be things in your life these are the areas of my life that I haven't surrendered to Jesus. I only try to just hunker down and do it. And so these are the two questions that I want us to process individually, and then later we'll reflect as a family in some small groups. But what characteristics about following Jesus do you find difficult to not rely on willpower, and why? For example, like we talked about a few weeks ago, generosity, anger, loving your enemy. And I would encourage you to look at Matthew chapter 5 and chapter 6 and chapter 7 to maybe refresh your memory. on some of the foundational and doctrinal things that Jesus taught. And then what does it look like to live a life that is reliant on Jesus and not your own strength during trials and storms? So these are some difficult questions. Like these aren't easy questions. And I think part of the reason why they're not very easy is because we have to admit that we maybe haven't done things correctly. I don't know about you, but that's super hard to admit. I don't know if there's any other prideful people in this room, but that's me. And it's hard for me sometimes to admit when I've wronged a person, when I've said something to a person, or when I've been living my life contrary to what Jesus has taught. But in those moments, I don't think Jesus leaves us in that state. But when we say, Jesus, here's the areas. Jesus, would you change these things in my life? Would you change these things in my heart? I want to further reflect your nature and your character. And let's surrender those things to Jesus. So I'm going to pray, and we'll spread out through the auditorium, and then we'll have further instructions in just a few moments. But Jesus, we thank you that you are the rock. We thank you that we don't have to just rely on trying really hard. Because Jesus, I'm really bad at trying really hard. And I can imagine that there's some other people in this room too that could identify with that. Some of us in this room maybe are so weary and so tired of trying hard that maybe we're just at our wits' end. We're just at the end. We're spent. But Jesus, I pray that your love and your grace would rejuvenate someone in this room tonight. As they realize that they don't have to keep their life together by trying hard, but if they surrender themselves to you, that you're the firm foundation that their life could be rested on. So that when the trials and the temptations and circumstances come their way, they're not blown over, but they stand firm because their foundation is in the truth of who you are. In your name we pray. Amen.